Hey everyone, before we get into this amazing new episode, I wanted to give a quick thank you to our sponsor, Track Farms. These guys just sent me some of their new tinctures, and they sent me the 1500 milligram ones. You know, that's because I'm a big boy, so when it comes to CBD, it kind of takes a lot to tame the beast. But they sent me these over, and I can tell you, for the first time ever, and I've tried lots of CBD products, I actually feel the effects of these tinctures. Just a general calm, anti-anxiety, restful. They're beautiful. So give these a shot. You know, I feel like a big part of it is just knowing that this is a very real product from real people who I know and am connected to. I think that it's such a big industry, such a growing industry that's amazing to buy from someone who you know is legitimately trying to create an awesome product. So check these guys out, Track Farms. I've got a special going for my listeners right now. It's at the link in my bio if you follow me on Instagram at thicksonlife, or if you just go to track-farms.com/strangers, that'll prompt you to enter the code strangers and you will get 15% off your entire order. So check them out at track-farms.com/strangers and use the code strangers. Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new Strangers Worth Meeting podcast episode. And with me today, I've got Ellen Noble of Tucson, Arizona. And Ellen is a professional mountain biking and cyclocross racer, which is something that I know honestly very little about, but seems very cool. So I'm really looking forward to having her on the show. Ellen, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been excited about this all morning and trying to find out what cyclocross is because, like most people, I understand what mountain biking is. It's sort
Yes.
of just like, I guess it seems pretty self-explanatory, but cyclocross was a world I knew nothing about.
Yes.
Can you give me the rundown in your own words of how the whole thing works?
Yeah, gladly. I guess like the quick and dirty of cyclocross is it's like a hybrid between road cycling and mountain bike racing. So it's everyone knows what road is. It's like the Tour de France, and then everyone knows what mountain biking is because if you were born before like 1990, whatever, you've seen it, probably seen it in the Olympics. So cyclocross is a hybrid of the two. So we're going to be on like a road style bike. So we have the drop handlebars, thinner frames, narrower tires. But then you also have a little bit of tread on your tires and you're on an off-road course. So the races are typically 45 minutes to an hour. They're incredibly dynamic. So it's a group race that's like really sprinty, really fast. It's like kind of seen as like an all-out race pace, like full-blown effort. Um, and the really unique thing about cyclocross is that it thrives in adverse conditions. So the muddier, the rainier, the colder, the snowier, the better. And the last part with cyclocross that's really, really unique, the reason that we have these smaller bikes is because oftentimes you'll approach obstacles that you can't ride and that you're forced to get off and run with your bike. So it's a really fun kind of like light-hearted sport. Obviously the athletes take it seriously, but it's supposed to be like really spectator friendly and definitely like a culture of like beer and partying for the spectators that watch it. Yeah.
I've gotten fairly familiar with that type of culture actually, because on another recent episode I talked about gravel racing with a
Yes.
gravel racer, and he was describing to me all the different kind of things that go into the community aspect of that, and so it definitely seems like there's this fun world. I actually don't know what happened in Tucson, but I happened to come across so many different professional athletes while I was in Tucson. It feels like it's a
Yeah.
bit of a mecca. Is there
Yeah.
a reason for that?
I think it's the weather for sure. It's like
Hmm.
a really cycling friendly city with Mount Lemon and like a lot of bike routes and like the loop path, which is 100 miles long. It's like 100 miles of interconnected bike paths. So like you don't have to interact with any cars. And it's amazing 365 days a year for weather. I mean, no one really is looking for a place to train year round. Most people live somewhere kind of cold, so then they're trying to find somewhere that's good December, January, February, and March, and Tucson delivers. So it's yeah, it's it definitely has a bit of a reputation for being the place to go if you want to train with other athletes, do really hard group rides, and never have to compromise and ride the trainer.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, I
Yeah.
certainly buy that. I think people on the podcast are probably really tired of hearing me say that Tucson has become one of my favorite places ever. Um,
Mhm.
we went there to kind of responsibly get out of a lot of population during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and ended up spending a month there. And I
Yeah.
could have stayed for way longer. It's just that it got very, very hot really quickly,
Yeah,
and
it
it was
did.
starting to drive us crazy.
Like,
Like when you,
overnight.
oh
We
yeah,
just
and then there was
got
just a
hot.
week, and we're just like 105
I
every day.
know, yeah.
It's difficult in the RV too because the AC unit is right overhead, and if you have that on for 50% of your day, not a big deal. It's pretty loud, but like you can live with it. I've got nice headphones, so like I just tune it out. But
Mhm.
in Tucson, it's on 100% of the time at
Yeah.
full blast, and you're still sweating and you're still kind of dying. And like after a few days, it's like Andrew and I will be fighting with each other, and we're like, "Why are we fighting?" And it's like, "Oh, we're just so annoyed. We're just so
Yeah.
like, we just feel so stuffed in this space, and we can't go outside. It's too hot. You're gonna die." So
Yeah.
it gets oppressive really quick, I feel like.
Yeah, we had to escape to the mountains for a couple of days. We went up to Flagstaff just for a long weekend because we just needed a little bit of time to sleep in because waking up at 5 every morning, it's like at a certain point, yeah, you just get tired of, like, not being able to go
Yeah,
outside during the day. We were like, "We just
right,
wanna stay outdoors."
exactly. You have to become, I think we became night owls kind of in Tucson. We were kind
Yeah.
of doing it to where we would get up super early to get like a workout and some outdoor time in, and then we would we instituted sort of a mandatory nap in the middle of the day when there's
Yes.
nothing to do anyway and it's just hot, and then we would have the whole evening stay up really late because that was the time you could actually be outside again.
Yeah.
um but that's an odd schedule. We headed further north, and now we're back on a better schedule. We're in
Yeah.
Grand Junction right now, which has been awesome so far. We've been on here for a couple days. When were you in Flagstaff? Like over the last weekend?
Yeah, just last weekend, and into Monday just to have a little bit of time away. We were in a cabin, like, in the middle of nowhere, so it was really nice.
That's super cool. We did
Yeah.
a really similar thing. Um, we weren't really intending it, but actually I was also in Flagstaff, so we were in the same town at the same time. Look
No
at us.
way.
Yeah, because so Andrea has been planning forever this boondocking trip, which is where you take the RV and go dry camping. You
Mhm.
bring water with you, and you just run off the batteries for a couple days. And
Yeah.
it was really quite a cool experience, except that on our way north, we were heading to Moab out of Tucson.
Yeah.
We got that we had truck issues. So we're like going into Flagstaff on the interstate, literally doing 30 miles an hour because that's the most our truck will
No.
output. Yeah. So luckily, Andrea is amazing, and she was like, "Oh, there's a BLM campground at this next exit," and I just took it, and we parked the RV. I called the local Chevy dealer, and we were in the
Yeah.
door getting the truck worked on that same day, which was
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
So we ended up staying that night in Flagstaff, but the not fun part is that the dealer did not fix the truck. It
Oh,
seems
crap.
like they didn't actually check it. They just sort of reset the computer. So
Yeah.
the next day when we're heading again in Moab direction, the same thing happened again. But it was all good. It happened kind of toward the tail end of that day. So we like limped
Yeah.
in, and we did some camping right near Canyonlands National Park,
Yeah, wow.
and just stayed in the middle of nowhere. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good
So I
area to get stuck in if you have to
Yeah.
wait it out a few days. It's pretty beautiful.
Well, yeah, and I really like the experience of sort of being isolated like that, just out in the middle of nowhere. Was it so you guys were in a cabin also in the middle of nowhere in
Yeah.
Flagstaff? Is this you and your significant other doing this
Mhm.
together?
Yeah.
It's a nice experience. It's like a good break from the everyday to get out there and do that.
Yeah, it really was. We didn't have, like, no Wi-Fi at the cabin, and, like, really spotty cell service, so we really just had to, like, just enjoy the land and just played a lot of guitar, and I read some books, and yeah, it was just a really nice break, especially, like, with everything going on with the pandemic. We were still able to be really responsible and, like, weren't interacting with anyone, like, locally or anything, so we weren't, like, potentially infecting anyone or getting infected, but it was just a nice break from, like, this pretty constant cycle of bad news, and, you step back into reality on Monday, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, even more bad stuff has happened," but it was a really nice reset just to be able to be responsible, but still have, like, a little
Oh
bit of
yeah,
a
I
break.
think it's the perfect time to go and get isolated if you want. In fact,
Yeah.
if everybody did that, I suspect this would be over far quicker.
Yeah.
But not everybody has the means, so there you go.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but no, we've been finding the same thing. Like we were we were concerned at the start of this whole thing as to what it's going to be like living in an RV full time. How do we
Yeah.
approach this? And actually, I would say we've been able to be out of contact way more probably than the average person. Like we already work remotely. The only thing we have to do when we travel, if we stop at a gas station to fuel up, like I throw a glove on and fill it up, we don't have to even go inside. We have a
Yeah.
bathroom in the RV. It's like the
Yeah.
easiest thing. So it's actually been kind of a blessing to get to go wherever and do that responsibly lately.
Yeah,
It's been
that's
pretty fun.
really fortunate. Yeah, that's awesome.
You brought up two rabbit holes I really need to go down with you though.
Yeah.
And one was the guitar playing,
Yeah.
and the other was the books. Before I forget, so
Okay. Yeah.
I had I kind of like deep dive on everybody's Instagram who I'm gonna be interviewing, and I saw like
Yeah.
one picture of you with a guitar. There wasn't a ton about it, so
No.
you do in fact play guitar then,
Ooh, that's generous.
is it?
Better context would be, and then this could be a deep rabbit hole, but I'll keep it like not too bad. So my boyfriend and I live in Tucson together, and he is like, to say a guitar like aficionado is a gross understatement. Like he
Really?
knows everything that there is to know about vintage guitars. He collects and he plays the blues. Like he's an incredible guitar player. He's an incredibly knowledgeable collector. So I didn't know or give a crap about guitars before we met. I was like, yeah, there's a guitar that's made of wood, and then there's a guitar that's made of another wood that's painted, and then you plug one
Uh-huh.
in, and then there's one that you don't plug in. And that's all I knew. I like did not care. And then, like you start to care about a person, and then you care about what they care about. And now, like, we'll be driving down the road and he'll be like quizzing me on different, like, random facts about, like, pre CBS fenders and all this crazy stuff. So I have, just by proxy, I've learned a lot about vintage guitars. I think that the process of making guitars and like the whole like luthier side of things is really, really cool. And then every now and then I pick it up and play a little bit, but I wouldn't really say that like being able to strum through like a chord progression makes me like an avid guitar player by any stretch. But I have a lot of guitar in my life with not being super musically gifted.
Well, I saw it was one of the things I saw as I was doing my homework on you was that I felt like music came up in almost everything that I found about like different articles and things about you, where it was like
Yeah.
specifically it always seemed like music was mentioned with you, like what type of music you listen to, and that's a big thing for
Yeah.
you.
I love music. Like I'm a super sensitive person. So music is like really big for me because I'm so sensitive and because I like feel so much so strongly. Like music is incredibly powerful for me. So it's like a really big, like it's a training tool, and it's like a mood booster, and it can really like help me get to where I need to be before races and stuff like that. And so it's actually like it actually really bums me out that I didn't really learn how to play anything when I was younger, and that like I didn't hone into how important music was to me when I was younger, because I think that if I could play, it would be a really good outlet. So I'm still learning, and I'm planning on leaving Tucson for a bit this summer, and I've been trying to push Steven into finding me a guitar that I could bring with me that isn't vintage and that wouldn't be like a loss of an artifact if it were to like
Yeah.
break or anything. Um, so I'd still really like to, but yeah, just listening to music and hearing Steven play and understanding like the process of building guitars and stuff, that is something I really enjoy. So although I'm not super musical myself, music has played like a pretty big part in my life.
I feel that same way about listening to
Yeah.
music. It's actually funny. I did an episode back when the whole pandemic was starting. I was like, okay, I just need to do one remote episode and then I'll be able to get back together with people. And here I
Yeah.
am, obviously
Right.
2, 3 months later. But I did an episode with my dad, who is a big music lover.
Really.
And I talked with him a little bit about how I feel that same way about listening to music. Like it impacts me really heavily, just like with you. But I I often opt not to listen to music because of that. Because like I
Yeah.
can't get that distracted. I can't go that far, like
Yeah.
into my feelings. It's like, no, no, I gotta like I have things to do today.
Yeah, I
So
know.
it's a struggle kind of. But specifically, I also enjoyed that. I think you mentioned in the caption that you were gonna play Wonderwall, and that's one of my favorite. I actually really love that song. I feel like it
I love
gets
it. I
made fun
love
of,
that
but such a
song
good song.
too, but yeah, I was definitely making a joke just because it's something I say to my boyfriend all the time. I'll be like, because he knows every song, like, by memory,
Right.
like, he can hear it once and play it, like, he's that kind of, like, talent, and so I'll be like, well, I'll ask him to play Wonderwall, he's like, I don't know it, I can't play it," and I'm like, okay, everyone knows how to play Wonderwall."
You've
So
got
it's a good joke, but, I'd be happy if I could play Wonderwall. That would be, like, levels above where I am right now. I can
what
only
are
play
those
Taylor Swift.
ones that everybody oh that's funny. What are the ones that everybody knows Wonderwall? I feel like everybody can play Wagon Wheel too.
Oh, and
And
Smoke on the Water is, like, the
Smoke on the Water,
original,
okay.
like, I wanna play a song that
Uh-huh.
but now it's, like, it's become such a meme, like, to play Smoke on the Water because it's just,
Right.
like, power chords.
And and like the intro to Blackbird, that's the other one, which
Oh,
frankly
I
I'm actually
know.
like trying to learn that right now, mostly just because like my finger picking is so bad that
Yeah,
like it's actually a decent challenge to try to like get used to some things. So
yeah.
but I don't are there any others that are just like standards like any like hand the dude at the frat party the acoustic guitar and he knows this song.
That's, like, the joke
It's
with
got to be Wonderwall.
Wonderwall, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are others, but, um yeah, meanwhile, I'm struggling because I don't want to just be, like, a stereotype of, like, that person that picked up guitar at 24 and that can only play, like, Wonderwall or, like, Taylor Swift, which is all I know. So I had asked my boyfriend, I was like, "Okay, what if, like, we just practice really hard and I just learn how to play, like, Layla or something, like, like, a really famous guitar song, but that wasn't, like, super basic," and I was like, "And maybe it would elevate me so I could play, like, the more simple songs because it's, like, it sets the bar so high," but he said that
You
that
need
might not be
to
the best logic.
you need to check out I just this is so funny. I just interviewed Marcos Mena. He's
Yeah.
from the band Standards in LA.
Okay.
And the dude like after we're done here, go like look up his stuff because
Yeah.
the dude can play like two-handed things in these really weird time signatures. Like the way I found him, one of the first videos I saw of his was him playing Mr. Sandman, but he's doing
Yeah.
both the bass part and the melody on two different fingers, tapping the frets.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it sort of blows my mind because he's like able to keep time in both hands separately, and
Yeah.
it really, really was mind bending for me. So that's what you should learn how to play some of their songs, and
Oh,
then the world will be
definitely.
really
Yeah,
impressed. Yeah.
not, like, optimistic at all.
Yeah, I mean, and well, oh man, and he has this one video where he's like, because I think he does instructional videos too, and he has one
Yeah.
where he's playing like Mary Had a Little Lamb in a round on
Oh,
each
yeah.
hand,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to someone who has one brain. So the dude
Yes.
has two.
Yeah.
He must. I'm certain of that. Um, to go down the other rabbit hole. I love this the
Yeah.
first rabbit hole. It's great. Because I am right there with you. I'm like that basic guitar player who can do. I can definitely play Wonderwall if I knew the
Yes.
chords, and I like playing like Simon and Garfunkel songs because I grew up with
Okay.
them, and
Yeah.
they have like if you skip all the impressive things Paul Simon's doing and
Yeah.
just play the chords, then you can
Yeah.
almost sound like you know what you're doing, which is pretty fun. Um, but the other rabbit hole was books. So you read a bunch
Oh,
of
yeah.
books in Flagstaff. What do you read? What do you get into?
Well, it's funny, so the book I was reading in Flagstaff, I have it right next to my bed. It's called Breathe You're Alive by Thich Nhat Khan, which I might have kind of butchered his name, but
I
he's like
won't tell.
pretty, I guess, like pretty famous in the sort of like mindfulness and like spiritual world. I think that he was a monk that like studied meditation and breathing and stuff, and so it's sutra on the full awareness of breathing. But normally, I'm not like a self help book kind of person. Like I think that it's really really common for athletes to be like so singular in their interests where like they can't even read for enjoyment, like every single thing that they do has to like play back into their sport. And so like I think that Breathe You Are Alive is interesting, and I'm really looking forward to doing some of the breathing exercises in the book because I think that it would help me not just in sport but just in life. But like for the most part, I don't read those kind of books. Like it's just like I don't really read memoirs or anything like that. I have like a couple of books that I have kind of started. I have to read like 5 books at a time. um,
Mm-hmm. I'm
so
the
I'm,
same
I'm
way.
like I'm reading like multiple books right now, and one of them has to do with like mysterious illness in women, which is like if we wanted to go down a real rabbit hole, like
Oh
I
no,
could
go
go
there.
there.
No, no, no. This, I actually weirdly know. I think I know at least somewhat about the subject that you're talking about. Is
Okay,
it? Are we talking about like old doctors prescribing women with hysteria and that kind of thing?
a little bit. So that's like oh my gosh, this is really exciting. That's like a big part of it. So this particular book talks about this woman with a mysterious illness. So it can be that can be categorized by a lot of things, but it's basically like having a really hard time getting a diagnosis. But then it's like the vast majority of people with mysterious illness are women because
Mm-hmm.
it's like famously hard for women to be taken seriously in the medical world because you describe how you're feeling and you're tired and you're in pain, and it's like you have all these symptoms that are sometimes vaginal, sometimes colorectal, like all these problems that could be issues like with your ovaries and like cramping and menstrual stuff. And it's like, yeah, it sounds like you need like antidepressants or antipsychotics, and it sounds like you
Yes.
should be in therapy, and maybe you're just like a crazed housewife. And so, this particular book, one of the books that I'm reading right now, that I'm pretty close to finishing, is about this one woman's process of basically how her like gross mistreatment and malpractice throughout the course of her like medical life resulted in so much trauma that she just kept getting worse. So like she had like vaginal trauma because one doctor didn't take her pain seriously to know that like she shouldn't have like a procedure done like she shouldn't have had a procedure done because he didn't take her level of pain seriously. And then it's like that
Mm.
started this whole series of her being septic or like having sepsis and all this stuff. And so it's just really interesting. And so I have personally dealt with a bit of like mysterious illness myself, and reading her story like just blew my mind because I related on like a very, very minor level. Like I would never compare what I've been through to what this woman went through. But she's like the extreme case. But I know that she's been this voice for a lot of, as they call them, WOMIs, which is women of mysterious illness, because so many people like I went through this process of simply trying to get a diagnosis of what ended up being an autoimmune condition, which is like pretty basic and pretty easy to diagnose, like if you know what you're looking for. And I had a couple of doctors turn me away because they were like, well, like you're still biking a lot. Like you're totally fine. It's like basically because I wasn't legitimately bedridden, no one would take me seriously. And then I had a couple people ask me, like even people in cycling, like, well, like, are you working with a therapist? Like implying that maybe I should just retire or maybe that I was just depressed. And I was like, yeah, I'm freaking depressed. Of course I'm depressed. Like my career fell out from under me almost overnight. Like that's super depressing, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
for nothing. Like it kind of depends on which way you look at things. So it's like which came first, the illness that caused the depression or did the depression cause the illness? And in a lot more cases than I think are given credit, the illness caused the depression. So that's been a big piece of research that I've been reading is understanding autoimmune conditions, mysterious illness, and kind of women and women's place in medicine, and not just like female doctors, like women in their treatment in medicine. So that's been a big research project, but normally I just read murder mysteries.
I
So it's
love
a
it.
bit
I
of a
love
change of
it.
heart.
You have to get, well, you really do. You have to get a wide array of like things that you're reading. Like I that at least that's how I feel. Like
Yeah,
I can't be on one subject for a long time. Like lately I've been I just found Jack Carr is just now kind of becoming big with his books. He's like an ex-Navy SEAL who's writing these
okay,
great like thrillers.
yeah,
And I've just finished literally all three in like a week.
yeah,
And but then I also am drawn to like, okay, I need to read another like nonfiction. Like I need to get some more
yeah.
of that science in me. But have you the reason I had actually just recently known a little bit about kind of what you're talking about in like this world is, have you seen the documentary on Netflix called Unrest?
No.
Okay, so I just watched this like a couple weeks ago, and it's about a woman who has chronic fatigue syndrome,
Yes.
which I
Yep.
had never heard of, but it's one of those sort of like undiagnosed, still has yet to find a treatment for it, and they
Yeah.
think it's slightly related to like multiple sclerosis, but
Yep.
it's so hard to tell what this thing is even. But they
Mhm.
think that part of the reason is that because it like 75% of the people who are affected with it are women, and so
Yes.
it's one of those things where it's just it hadn't been taken seriously in history of medicine long enough
Yes.
or given dedicated funding because potentially because she's a woman describing her symptoms or whoever it is isn't able to get proper treatment and
Right.
for this it's that documentary is honestly heartbreaking like like it's so many people who I'd never realized it and so scary to watch it honestly because it's just like all of a sudden you may just spend the rest of your life in bed because you can't
Yeah.
move and you just like and they think it has something to do with like your mitochondria aren't producing enough actual energy from the input and so it's
Yeah.
rough, it's
Yeah.
very rough.
It was like a huge fear of mine because basically like getting diagnosed with, they call it ME/CFS, but just chronic fatigue syndrome, I guess, is it would be pretty devastating as a professional athlete because
Yeah,
it's one of those things where people are just like, "Yeah, I guess you have chronic fatigue. Sorry."
yeah,
But there's
sorry, there
actually,
you
because
go.
there's so little research, and she talks about it a lot in this book, because she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and also
Oh.
chronic pain syndrome, which is like apparently the way that she categorized it is like it's there's like a way to categorize pain like on a scale, and the scale like doesn't cover what chronic pain syndrome feels like. So this woman has like this plethora of like comorbidities. But yeah, so getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome was like a huge fear of mine because for a long time it felt like no matter where I looked, I couldn't find something that explained why I felt the way that I felt. And but it's been really interesting because I personally have a friend with CFS, and reading this book about this woman with CFS, um, it's a bit of, if anyone's listening to this and they have CFS, I would never want to like insult them, but I think that the diagnosis can be a little bit lazy, and that's something that a doctor that I worked with had said. He's like, it's possible that you could have CFS, but I'm not willing to go there with you yet because there are
Because it's a
so
catch-all.
many. It is, and so it's like it's just saying like we have no way of knowing how this happened to you, so we're just gonna say like, yeah, you just have chronic fatigue. Sorry, like,
Yeah.
so like my good friend that has it has actually discovered that he had like a deficient amount of nitrates. And then this woman, the author of this book that I'm reading, she um she had something going on in her hippocampus that was producing like an insufficient amount of hormones that basically like overstressed her body, that impacted cortisol that was giving her chronic fatigue. So she still has chronic fatigue. Nothing will ever stop her from having chronic fatigue, but it didn't come out of nowhere. Her body didn't just
Hmm.
decide one day to be really tired, and that's the difference. And I think that this documentary you're talking about that I'm so excited to watch, this
Oh, it's so
documentary and
sad.
all
Oh
of
my
these
God.
people that are going through it, it's like, yeah, sometimes people just like, it's not just about the diagnosis. Obviously, having a diagnosis can be like, can make people feel really seen. Like when I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disorder, I felt so much better because I realized that it wasn't all in my head, which is like every woman's biggest fear. Probably every person who's dealing with any sort of like medical mysteries, biggest fear is like, am I depressed? Should I just retire? Um, and yeah, so it's like the more that they learn about these illnesses, yeah, the more they realize that nothing happens on its own. Like, and the
Hmm.
biggest thing that this woman talks about that's really interesting, and it's like a little bit more Western medicine, is trauma can play a really big role in people's mysterious illness. So it's like for people, if it's physical or emotional, there's usually a trauma that triggers a reaction in the body that can be
Yeah.
linked to like kind of a downward spiral.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. So I've really enjoyed reading these books and watching some films and stuff on it, and obviously just doing my own research going to doctors and all of that. But then I feel like every now and then it's like I also need a little bit of a treat to read something more lighthearted because it's
Right.
pretty heavy, like reading about people that are going through really sad things and then realizing that you relate to it a lot yourself is like yeah, it's a little bit it's tough.
It's a dangerous point in life,
Yeah.
to be in your mid 20s, because there's a lot of shit that can go down at this age, that supposedly you may be free and clear of after you pass the age of 30. Like, this is when
Yeah.
autoimmune shit happens, and this is when schizophrenia happens and can just like
Yeah.
happen overnight to someone.
I know.
That is terrifying to me. But you know what? The more I've learned about that one, it really seems like it has to do with people who are under a lot of chronic stress. Like, it happens to students in law school,
Mhm.
and in med school, things like that, like late 20s. If you're under immense amounts of stress for long periods of time at this age, like, shit may go down.
Yeah.
Um, I can't believe how many things you just listed that get me so freaking fired up. Like, because this is something that Andrea and I talk about a lot. We have a really so we've been working in health and wellness. Our business marketing team, we primarily work with health and wellness practitioners, who are generally outside of the norm. So, well, like not entirely outside of allopathic medicine. It's always evidence-based care, but a lot of midwives and nurses and
Yeah.
chiropractors and that sort of side of things. Um, and the more we've found, the more, anytime either of us has an issue, there's so much self research and self diagnosing, and it feels like not everybody takes their own health into their own hands sort of enough.
Yeah.
And it makes me really sad. And so a lot of people, I think, just turn to a doctor to say, what's wrong with me? And then we look at symptoms, and then we diagnose, and then we give medicine. Um,
Yeah.
and medicine even is like, has positive connotations. We really just give prescription drugs that we don't really know what they're doing to
Yeah.
people. So like, Andrew and I have been very, very much on the proactive side of health for a long time, and really trying to make
Yeah.
sure we understand for ourselves anything that may be going wrong. And it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like added to the list of things you have to do as a person that just take up so much time and attention.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
full-time job if, like,
it
you have an
is,
illness that you're trying to figure out, like,
or even
I
just trying to avoid an illness.
I know.
Just trying to
Yeah.
be generally healthy, because there's so much
Yeah.
misinformation out there. Like, luckily there's so much information out there too, because we have the internet and we can find reputable sources and get good things. But there's so many disagreements, and so little consensus when it comes
Yeah.
to health that, oh, it's tricky.
It is. It's so tough, and I I almost yeah, it's so like, seeing people that really just exclusively rely on doctors, like, I think especially, like, our, like, older parents and grandparents, like, every time, like, my grandparents are dealing with something, they just go to their doctor. And fortunately, they have a really good doctor. But after being turned away from multiple people that had no interest in whether or not I got any better, I realized like I have to advocate for myself here. Like it's something I've always believed in and I didn't realize how much I would have to do it medically. But I remember like the kind of breakthrough appointment that I had. I had been through like a lot of doctors. I'd had a lot of frustrating experiences and I walked into my doctor's office with a bag of my hair in a Ziploc,
Oh,
50 pages of medical records, like highlighted passages of, like different parts from my medical records. I had every lab that I had ever done since I was like 12 years old. I had highlighted it. I had made a graph of the different values and how they related. And he didn't really need it because he just believed me and he like could do an exam and come to his own conclusions. But I was ready. I was like, I am so prepared. Like, if you don't want to listen to me, I'm going to make you listen to me because like this is my last option. Like it's gone on too long. I need someone to take me seriously. And yeah, it just felt weird to like realize, like leaving there with like a briefcase full of my medical information, being like, is this really what it's come to? Like to have like, basically walk into a courtroom for yourself of like,
yeah.
please, I'm not
Well,
just
it is.
stressed.
It's tricky. I mean, there's a part of me that says that I am a big advocate for just personal responsibility. Like, you're in charge
Yeah.
of your life. Like and we live at a time where you can get the information. So make good decisions. It is possible. At the same time, it's really disheartening that the system that exists to help us when we can't help ourselves, we don't have the knowledge to or the resources,
Yeah.
it doesn't do a very good job of it when we need them to. I one of my favorite people is actually a doctor he lives in Tucson of all places.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Andrew Weil, who has
Mhm.
been talking about integrative health since like literally the 60s. Like
Yeah.
he's been saying the things that we're finally starting to get to now
Yeah.
for 60 years,
Yes.
40, 50 years. So it's hilarious to hear him talk about this when he's like, oh yeah, I knew that all this like a really, really long time ago. And you go read his old books and he's talking about all these things. But
Yeah.
one of the things he brought up, and I'm not a source for anybody out there, like fact check me, but I think he was talking to someone and said that they had done a study on the average amount of time a patient speaks before a doctor interrupts them, and
Oh,
it's roughly 13 seconds. So you
yeah.
get about 13 seconds to speak for yourself. And at the same time, let's show some love for the doctors who are working in a pretty broken system and don't have
Yeah.
time for everybody and don't have the ability to get personal with everyone and
Yeah, they
understand that
really
history.
don't.
And
I mean,
yeah,
I
it's
think
like,
I think so many doctors get into medicine because they want to help people and they want to
yep,
be that person, and then our insurance system just doesn't allow it. And I think that yeah, I mean, I think that like, doctors are human. Like there are good people and there are bad people, so it means that there are good doctors and there are bad doctors. But I think a lot of people that I know that work in the medical field got into it because they wanted to help people, and then the system is so broken that it's not really possible. And I think that it can
right,
kind of like harden people over the course of a career of like, okay, like let's get down to it. Like what do you need? What do you want? Like do you need a prescription? Do you need this? Like reading this book, it's so interesting too because it's like it can be really hard to get people to take you seriously when you have no physical ailments. Like you can't say, "Oh, I think I broke my leg," and then they look and you have like they can't do an
you either
X-ray.
have or you
They can't
have
do
it.
an
It's
X-ray
binary.
of your system because you're like, "I'm
Right,
really tired. I've gained 20 pounds. I can hardly get out of bed. I can't ride more than a couple times a week." And then you start crying because it's so much. It's like so
right,
exhausting and it's so depressing. And then they're like, "Oh, here we go. Another like crazy woman." Like here we go. And that's exactly what she talks about in this book is like she breaks down because she's not being taken seriously. And then you're definitely not going to be taken seriously like once you start crying because there's just not time for it. And
right.
so,
It's. I'm sorry. I don't mean to
no,
keep interrupting you. I'm
no,
so
no, you're
excited. So
not. I
please
know.
finish. Please finish.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just the turning point for me with my diagnosis was I went to a doctor and I was really fortunate. I was able to pull together the money to be able to go and pay out of pocket, not through my insurance. I paid cash to go to a doctor. Well, not cash, you know what I mean? I paid my own money to go to a
Hmm.
doctor, and he sat with me for an hour, and he doesn't take
Right,
insurance because he was so burnt out by the medical world that he said that he wanted to be able to sit with patients until they had found out what they needed to find out. But I'll tell you, like 30 minutes in, I started to get uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, it's gone on long enough. Like, I've never spent this much time with a doctor. Like, I'm starting to feel a little bit self-conscious. I'm like, don't you have other people that need your attention?
isn't that crazy
And yeah,
that it feels
he
like that?
listened. Yeah, but it's crazy, and I it's so unfortunate because a lot of people can't afford that. And it's
Hmm.
like on top of what I pay for health insurance, it was it's a pretty expensive visit, and it was worth it for me because I got what I came there for. But it's yeah, not everyone can afford to pay hundreds of
Yeah,
dollars on top of
it's
their
good. It's
premium.
good you found a good doctor who's able to do that. I mean, it's like anything autoimmune related is like it's such a mystery, and it's just like how you
Mhm.
saying you read mystery books. It's like how good would your mystery book be if there's a massive mystery that the main detective needs to solve, except the main detective also has 40 other mysteries he's got to solve. So he tries to just solve this one really quickly, as close as he can get it in about 2 minutes, and then
Yeah,
move on to the next one.
right.
It's not much of a book.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, "This book sucks." Yeah, my book would not
Yeah.
be good.
He's like it's probably the shady dude. It's probably that guy that did it. All right,
Yeah, but
who's next?
we can't go to court because there's no court for this particular crime, and we just have to wait and hope that maybe the shady guy doesn't kill anyone again. Like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's
Oh
a mess.
man. This has been oh man, I love these rabbit holes. Thank you
Yes.
for rolling with me.
Yeah,
It's
thank
funny
you.
for the listeners don't really get to hear this, but when I'm kind of like letting people know what to expect from the episode, I specifically mention that if there's a rabbit hole, we're going to go down it because
Yeah.
that's the fun of a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
if you would like to see, in this case, Ellen Noble doing a sports interview, you're more than welcome. There's lots of them online,
Oh, yeah.
and she does a great job. But who gets to ask Ellen Noble about the book she's reading and then have a 30-minute discussion about women's health and autoimmune disorders? I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
I love it. It's so much more fun than, like, the standard interviews that
yeah.
we do.
So you part of this, just to keep us kind of near the health train, I guess, because that's fun. It seems like you are someone who obviously you have to take your health quite seriously to do
Yeah.
the sport that you do because you're at your physical limits doing it. And I also noticed that you seem to be quite a foodie.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think I've seen you cook in some really like fancy ramen dishes.
Yes.
So where does food fall in for you? Are you like a real nutritional nut too, or do you just go for whatever tastes good, or like how do you approach food?
Yeah, I'm a huge foodie. I never really liked cooking, but I've started to enjoy it more. And a big part of my self discovery and mystery research was discovering that I had like some pretty major food allergies. So I've had to get a lot more into cooking lately because it's so much harder. Like I've started making some epic ramens because I'm allergic to gluten. So I can't just go and sit down at like some, baller ramen place and get a meal. So a lot of the stuff I cook at home is stuff that I couldn't eat out. But yeah, it's been a really fun process, and I know a lot about nutrition just because I've been really fortunate to be able to consult with a lot of like nutritional experts over the course of my career. But yeah, I would say like I'm definitely like nutritionally minded. I always try to have like a lot of vegetables in the meal or a salad with it, so that I'm like making sure that I'm always getting what I need. But I think yeah, I'm pretty like macro focused, like macronutrient wise. So I'd say like I walk a fine line. Like I'll make some gluten free brownies every now and then, but I'm not like I'm not restricting myself there.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. I'm so big on food.
Yes.
Everybody who listens to the podcast knows that, and I have done so many different episodes where all I want to do is talk about food. Um,
I could do
I
that so easily.
I've been cooking everything as close to scratch as possible for Andrea and myself for oh gosh, like just a really long time now.
Mhm.
We've really cut out even going to restaurants like at all, which has been pretty cool. And hard to do living in as small a space as we do with a tiny
Oh
kitchen,
my god, I
but
can't
like we make
imagine.
it work.
Yeah.
We make it work. I had to learn a bit, but now we've got like our solid like structure of meals down, and so
Mhm.
it all kind of works out. But it is one of those things where I imagine in a competitive sport like the one you do, where you're at that maximum capacity limit, like the meal you ate the night before makes a difference between first place and second place. That person who is paying attention has that exact, it's like that macro balance or whatever it is that works for you to get you across that finish line first.
Yeah.
It can make or break.
Yeah, yeah,
No
it's a
getting
it's
around
a
it.
big thing. And I mean like I think a huge thing that like the best I don't really know how to lead into this, but talking about macros, like we need protein and we need fats. But really like for the efforts that we're doing before a cyclocross or a mountain bike race, like we need carbohydrates.
Right.
And I think like a huge misconception is like, back in the 80s and 90s, people were like carbo loading. And they kind of realized that carbo loading, like in its like, proper execution wasn't effective. And it was actually like kind of gross and would like inundate your system because you could really only store like a certain amount of carbohydrates at once. But so then everyone was like, no, 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 like we don't carbo load anymore. So people took that to mean that like you don't really need a lot of carbohydrates. And you
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Like we still need to eat like basically as many carbs as like you can, but it means like you don't wake up at 3 a.m. and eat an entire box of pasta. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's been like this huge misconception because I don't think that people realized what carbo loading really was. And it was like gorging yourself
Yeah.
on like a
Yeah.
disgusting amount of carbs, like eating like 2 cups of rice with like chicken and some vegetables, like good. Like I said, eating a box of pasta before bed and then waking up in the middle of the night to eat more pasta, not good. So it's been funny to like, I've like raced and stayed with and known so many athletes over the course of my life and seeing the ones that are like consistently successful and the ones that will like have these like mysteriously bad days. The ones that are like really consistent have their nutrition dialed in and they're eating a lot more carbohydrates than I think a lot of people would expect.
Yeah, carbs have gotten that bad rep.
Yeah, they
I
really
think
have.
I keep thinking of the episode of The Office where Michael
Yes.
eats fettuccine alfredo
Yeah.
right before a
Oh
5K.
god, I know.
And he looks at the camera and he's like, "Time to carbo load." I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, it's not. It's not."
Right. Yeah, and that's like
uh,
that's the carb loading like that you want to avoid, and it's such a great example. But yeah, I think that it's people have taken it to mean like, oh, then I don't need carbohydrates, and it's like, no, you absolutely do. Like, you just don't need to make yourself sick off of it. So
right,
that's been a big focus for me. Like eating enough, eating the right stuff, and when I'm eating it has been something that I'm still working on. And I think like figuring out my food allergies and stuff, it's been like a big transition, and I actually do feel really thankful like right now. I mean, it's like such a terrible time, but I'm trying to make the most of it and like be the most effective with this downtime that we have and kind of learn a little bit more about myself like with um like trying some different pre-workout meals and stuff like that and post workout and and all of that so I can really be more dialed and be more purposeful when I get to race day.
right. Do you and you're doing that that carb diet without whole grains too. You said you said you have a gluten allergy. Did you like what kind of test did you do to determine gluten allergy?
I just did an elimination diet
An
and I
elimination
just
diet. You
had
felt a lot
to.
better after it was gone.
Yeah, I did. And yeah, I cut out gluten and dairy for a couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks, and I had been getting my blood levels done, and I hadn't really seen like a lot of improvement. And then I cut them out, and almost immediately like felt considerably better. And then couple months later, so like back in February, I got a test done for celiac and I got a test done for a dairy allergy. And I came back like for sure positive for a dairy allergy. But unfortunately, I wish I had known this before the test. But without any gluten or like with only trace amounts of gluten in my system, even if I had celiac, I couldn't test positive for it because I don't have enough gluten in my system to produce the antigen. So they can't really
Oh.
tell, but like for sure, I felt so much better. Like immediately the inflammation in my body like plummeted. Like I was super inflamed. I was like itchy. My allergies were horrible all the time. And then, just a couple of weeks of cutting out gluten, I felt so much better. So, and I had done the reason I started on that process is some of the research I was doing with a doctor or that I had read about a Dr. Amy Myers had said basically if you have the autoimmune condition that I have, you should never eat gluten or dairy again. Was basically like how she summarized it. Like she said that it's not great to make, you know, um absolutes with medicine. This is one of those situations where like there's really no way where this would this would work out for you. So it was a pretty easy decision for me. I was like, all right, goodbye. If it makes
It's
me feel
interest
better.
it's interesting for me. I feel like I I definitely think that a lot of people have gluten intolerance way more than we probably suspect.
Mhm.
And I think that, from what I've learned about like just history of human beings, it makes sense that we wouldn't have had access to uh, gluten all that often up until the agricultural revolution,
Yes.
and that's when it became a huge part of our diet. So I definitely follow all that. At the same time, I'm a big proponent of sourdough. I'm a
Oh
huge
yeah.
proponent of breaking down gluten, and so I had an episode on with these amazing sourdough bakers out of Las Cruces,
Oh
and
wow.
we got to do the whole sourdough talk. And so for me, I had the same exact thing where I, for a while, for several months, had cut out gluten. I was like, whoa, I feel a lot better. But then the more I learned about it, the more I was like, okay, really, this is just a protein that if it's sort of as long as I don't have celiac disease and as long as I don't have a sort of a true intolerance, which I admit are very real for a lot of people,
Yeah.
then if I'm going the sourdough route, then it makes the gluten so much more digestible. It doesn't spike your glycogen levels and all
Yeah.
that. So that was so now, primarily if we're doing anything with like whole grains, I make a sourdough on the regular. But even then, we
Yeah.
don't eat it a lot. Like it's still not a great idea to do it 4 times a week. We may have like
Right.
a little bit here and there once or twice a week, but that was a big change for me. I definitely wish more people would get on board with the sourdough revolution because it's happening. It's
Yeah.
happening. I
Oh,
believe
it's definitely
it.
happening. I mean, you only
Yeah.
have to be on
It is
social
right
media
now
for a
too.
minute a day, and it's, like,
Oh
majorly
yeah.
happening. I
I'm
think
frustrated because I'm one of the OG sourdough bakers and I can't buy bread flour because all you guys are sitting at home trying to get into bread and you're buying all my bread flour.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's okay. I want everybody to get into this. And maybe this is a moment where a lot of people during a pandemic are at home and they want to be able to make their own bread. So I celebrate that culturally and as a step forward that people are going to try to make their own bread. I'm also pissed because I want my bread flour back.
Totally. That's how I
That's where I'm
felt
at now.
once everyone tried to start making bread. Everyone talked shit on people being gluten-free and all this annoying stuff,
Right.
and then you know what happened? I couldn't find gluten-free flour for weeks because everyone was like,
Yeah.
"Well, I'd rather have gluten-free flour than nothing," and I'm like, "What am I supposed to eat?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, and
I
that's the
was, like,
thing is
so
like,
annoyed. I was like, "Oh, so now you guys don't mind being GF?"
yeah, most people don't need to go that route. Like
Yeah.
some people do, and you need to test and do elimination diets and see what's working for you. And that's back to that sort of like personal responsibility with your health.
Yeah.
But you just don't need to make assumptions. Like give it a shot first. Switch all of your whole grains to sourdough,
Yeah.
and then tell me you don't feel better. Like,
Yeah.
oh man,
I think the
oh
thing
jeez,
is one of my, like, pet peeves because I have this conversation with, like, family members and, like, my close friends and stuff a lot that, like, maybe the ones that aren't athletes, specifically if my mom ever listens to this, which she probably won't, like, my mom and I had this conversation where, like, for sure my mom has food allergies, and I just know it because of, like, just knowing my mom and knowing myself and all of this. And I'm like, "Mom, like, you should really consider, like, cutting this stuff out of your diet and just try it. Like, what's a couple of weeks, you know?" And she's like, "Well, I just don't think that I do, Ellie." And I think the thing with food allergies that's so funny is people think that, excuse me, but if you're not shitting yourself after you eat it, then you can't be allergic. But, like,
right?
I've never really had, like, major GI issues with my food allergies. Like, there's so many ways for allergies to impact your body. And so people just assume that, like, they just think of, like, being lactose intolerant. And so they're like,
Mm-hmm.
if I eat ice cream, I'm going to be on the toilet for 24 hours. And it's like, that's very, very real, but it's not the only way to be allergic to a food.
Yeah,
And so
it's
it's
energy
so
and immune
frustrating
system.
'cause
It's
yeah, I'm like, "Mom, you'd feel so much better just because you're not, like, throwing up or, you know, like, because you're not, like, you don't have an anaphylactic allergy." And so it's just funny, like, and it's everyone's decision, but the reason that I studied public health in school, and the reason that I did is because I just would love to be someone that could help other people live better versions or the best version of their life. And right now, I'm not doing much involved with public health because I'm pursuing professional athletics. But while I'm doing that, if I could help my family members discover certain things about themselves, I think that they would be a lot happier. And then sometimes it's like banging your head against the wall because it's like, okay, mom, yeah, you're right. Like you don't have to cut out dairy. You're fine. But it's just funny having these conversations with people where yeah, there's quite a bit of a misconception. Like for me, I could eat like an entire tub of yogurt. My stomach probably would not care at all, but tomorrow I'd be on the ride and my throat would close up like just
mm,
easy, easily. But I don't think that it's
right.
like an anaphylactic allergy. So it's very strange, but it's like that's just how it impacts me. So yeah, it's pretty funny and it's just knowing yourself, I guess. And I get so much crap from people being like, "Oh, I don't eat gluten or dairy." And they're like, "Oh, did you do it for weight loss?" And then I think about like the gluten-free, dairy-free like brownies with frosting that I make like at least once a month. And I just start
Yeah,
laughing. I'm like, "Oh
yeah,
yeah, definitely. I did it for weight loss." Like what a
yeah.
horrible like that's like the worst decision to do for weight loss.
It's got to be it's generational. There's generational things, and
Yeah.
I don't even blame people because I feel like up to this point there've been so many fad diets that were 2 years later just determined they were such bullshit,
Yeah,
and
seriously.
then everybody's like, oh, I knew it, and now we've got the same thing except there's a lot more research behind some of the new things that are coming out, and so.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I mean, it's up to everybody to make that decision for themselves. Actually, one of the
Totally.
things I'm a documentary fiend right now. I don't know
Oh,
why
yeah.
lately. I've just been watching a ton of documentaries, and the ones that I always watch, I love prison documentaries. Like anything about
Oh,
prison,
yeah.
I'm like in. I'm in. Um, but the thing I can't help but think as I watch these documentaries is like I always notice the shots of them eating and the food that they're eating, and
Yeah.
I'm like, why do people? Why are we so confused about the fact that fights break out in prison and things get violent and people's emotions are all over the place? Obviously, there's a lot of reasons for that. Okay, I'm not saying that this is the only one, but I have to wonder how much that diet is contributing to someone's mood swings throughout the day. Like
Yeah.
when all that those guys are, men and women, are able to take in is just like sugar because that's the cheap thing they can afford to buy,
Yeah.
and it's just like sugar and processed food and crap. And you're just like, I just can feel someone's blood sugar spiking and then dropping, and then that's when someone gets knifed. Like that's
Yeah.
very real shit, and it makes me sad. It's like I wish there was a better way to actually get nutrition to everyone,
I know.
especially people in an environment like that, because you need it. You need the ability to be clear-headed and
Yeah.
to stay calm, and that's one of those things where people don't realize that, like, if they have an issue with food, it's going to affect way more than just a physical. It's not just going to affect GI, it's going to affect your mood and your energy,
Absolutely.
and definitely it definitely bugs me. I didn't realize that your degree was in public health, which is great because now I've been waxing poetic like I know anything about health, to someone who has a degree and
I
could
mean,
easily
it's an
turn in that
undergrad
knowledge.
degree. It's not like I'm, I'm not like a like professor, or I don't have my doctorate in public health or anything, but yeah, I just no, I mean, even what you're talking about with like nutrition in prison and stuff, it's like it's so frustrating because in the US, like we just lock people up in cages and then expect them to be let out, however many years later, and then be contributing members of society. It's like there's nothing being done that's like rehabilitating these people. Like
Right.
so many of these people like just made a bad choice, or well, not even, some people didn't even make a bad choice and they were just in the wrong place in the wrong time, and our our legal system is racist and oppressive and all of this. So it's like we're really just locking these people away and then blaming them when they get let out, and then do something that puts them back in jail. And it's really upsetting. And that's like part of what I found so interesting about public health is it really tries to like peel back a couple of layers on like different things in society. So it's like even just looking at prison, it's like for a long time when I was younger, I just had so many different opinions where I was like, yeah, if you're bad, you're bad, and like you're a bad egg, and it is what it is, and like you did what you did, and you deserve the punishment that you get. And then you start to look at something from like more of a holistic approach, like from a well-rounded approach, and like you peel back the layers and you start to look at like the societal implications of the prison system and like systemic racism and all of this, and you realize that like putting people in a cage for a year to their entire life is not helping anyone. It's not cost effective. It's inhumane, and yeah, it just doesn't really make sense, and it's why like the US, like why private prisons don't really work, and it's just not right. So all that's to say is like that's why I love to study public health, because it taught it teaches like a really interesting way of thinking that isn't just like seeing something for what it is. It's trying to like look at all of the ways that it branches off and all of the implications. I guess if
Right.
that makes sense.
Right. No, it definitely does make sense. I feel like I definitely had seen or had guessed that you were someone who was quite passionate about public issues and societal problems and
Yeah.
things. And we don't have to get into it, but you have a a cool hashtag that has to do with your writing and links up to some of those issues. And so
Yeah.
it felt like you're definitely someone who is passionate on those subjects, and that's quite exciting. So
Yeah.
w- you've got like this. The thing for me is wondering like how someone with your schedule as a professional athlete can have time to think about anything else, because that lifestyle I know is so insane and so involved, day in and day out. Do you find time for yourself and other things amidst all the things you have going on between like travel and training and competing and all that stuff?
Yeah, I do. I think I kind of need it because I just like with the way that my brain works and my personality, I just don't think I could ever be like so singular. Like I think that having other interests and things that I'm passionate about are really important. So, no, not even just important. It's important to me. Like I think that there are other people who can just be all in for their sport or for their career. But for me, I think that it helps me to like have a little bit of a distraction because if I just had to focus on cycling all day every day, I would I think it would just be too much. I think it would actually stress me out a lot. So I think having a little bit of a distraction and feeling like I'm, learning something about something else and hopefully learning about something that would be a secondary career for me after cycling because I'm not going to be able to do it forever. All of it makes cycling feel a little bit more fun and fresh like when I do get to do it. And it's not to say that I don't spend a lot of my day working on cycling and towards those goals, but it's definitely um yeah, it's a nice break and a nice distraction.
Yeah, I believe that. One of the things I was curious about, I have never spoken to a Red Bull sponsored athlete. You get
Oh
to wear
yeah.
the hats and have the signs and all that cool stuff. That seems quite cool. That seems like almost a level as an athlete of its own,
Yeah.
because something about the Red Bull name there kind of puts you in a very official camp. What is that like? What does that look like working with Red Bull?
Yeah, that was like a huge dream come true for me. It's
Yeah,
definitely like a very special club to be a part of, to be a Red Bull athlete. Um, yeah, I mean, I think
because they've created a space for themselves here. They've like
yeah.
it's there's something to that brand that is well beyond the product that they sell that they've set records for things and they hold these crazy competitions and events and didn't they even do the one where it was like the highest ever oh gosh,
Oh,
skydiving?
yeah,
Like I feel like
he
that
there
was
was an athlete that like jumped from the stratosphere
right,
back into
right. So they've
like through the
made this
stratosphere.
whole
Yeah, there's
ethereal
like
thing.
I think that's like the unique part of Red Bull is like there are a lot of sponsors within the sport of cycling and just like within sports and esports like that sponsor athletes. There are even other like energy drink brands that sponsor athletes, but I think what sets Red Bull apart and what makes them such an honor to work with is they're really invested in their athletes and they want to support you to better you. Like I think that there are a lot of sponsors that like this is great too. I mean, it's awesome that are just kind of transactional. Like, can you do this for us and we're going to do this for you? But the Red Bull relationship like really pushes like they have high performance centers around the world. Like in Santa Monica, they have one in Austria where athletes can go and train and work with like head physiologists, and you can get testing done, and you can do like a lot of workouts in the gym. And they have like the media house where they're able to help you like kind of create these like amazing media projects, and there's such a large brand that have made an even bigger part of their brand in my opinion come from supporting athletes. So it's really cool. And I've been working with Red Bull for I'm going into my third year, and it's like larger than life. It's really incredible like getting to see the facilities in Santa Monica. And like for me this year, Red Bull they do what they call like high performance camps that you can like kind of pitch to them to kind of do whatever. So for me, this was called like the Red Bull High Performance Mud Camp because I've always felt like my mud riding in cycling was pretty weak. Like it was like a weak point of mine where like I'm really good at dry stuff. I feel pretty confident in the sand, and I'm really confident in like snow and ice, but like heavy mud was not my strong suit. So we like pitched this high performance camp to Red Bull, and it was so incredible. Like my coach and I were in Southern California, and this is where it got crazy because you're like, wait, mud in SoCal? So,
Right.
one of their super bike athletes, Eric Bostrom, who is also a cyclist and just an amazing guy. He's so cool. He has a dirt bike facility that he does like camps and stuff for people to learn to ride in the mud. And he has this like old creek that he's hooked a hose up to, and he'll just wet down this like big dirt bike track, but he's just using like old recycled water in this creek. Like he's never had to use potable water to
Right.
make this mud. And we rode dirt bikes in the mud, and we rode regular bikes like bicycles in the mud, and just practiced mud riding all day. And when I left, I felt like a completely different rider. Like it seriously was so impactful for me. I like can't describe it. And then like, a couple weeks later, the next race that I did was like one of the muddiest races I've ever done. And I won by like a huge margin both days. And I seriously felt so confident going into this race because I had just had this incredible experience with like such a gifted bike handler. And it's just like, I just can't imagine facilitating a mud camp like on my own. But they were able to do
Right.
it and make it happen. And I'm just so thankful for that because it's like a level beyond, it's like a couple of steps beyond what most sponsorships entail. So
Right. And
yeah.
instead of just wear this hat, it's like, where do you want to become a better athlete and how
Yes.
can we make that
Yeah.
happen? And that's a win-win for everybody
Yeah,
because you
it
become a
is.
better
Yeah.
athlete and you still wearing the hat and
Mhm.
you're winning in the hat. That's really cool.
Yeah.
There's like a whole other side of this because obviously you've got the athletic side, but then have also become quite a bit of an online celebrity. Um, it's one of the so I thought my last episode with Kai in Tucson was going to be my last Tucson episode,
Yeah.
but you because that was only because you and I had gotten together kind of later because I got stuck in probably a long list of message requests as you are
Yes.
the you've got that Insta check, the famous blue check. Congratulations, by the way. But that's a whole other side of life to deal with, and like a big responsibility of having that many people kind of behind you. What is that like? Is that a lot of pressure, or do you enjoy it? Do you get to use it as a platform, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's like taking the good with the bad. Like, I feel really thankful to have like the platform that I do have because I have like these amazing people that are always there to support me. But then it also means like you get to a big enough following and your stuff starts to reach people that like don't know anything about you.
Right,
Because like, the people that follow me at least like know what I'm about enough that they chose to follow me. But then like you start getting retweeted on Twitter or like you start popping up with people's explore pages and then people like really take issue with what you're doing and then like you're opened up to a lot of criticism. So that's like definitely a negative part of the job, but it's something I've learned to deal with like I think to the best of my ability being very sensitive. It's hard. But then, the other like the stress of it is like it's really competitive. So it's like when you get to a race, it's incredibly competitive because it's like you and all of your athletes, all of your athlete friends and competitors. But like you've prepared your best. But then like you get on the internet and it's you versus every athlete that's going to show up to your next event versus every influencer and every like, you know, blogger and all of this stuff. And so it's like it's really competitive and it's become such a big part of the sport where like a lot of sponsorship has to do with like now you have to be a professional athlete, a professional marketer, a professional photographer, a professional editor, like a professional
right.
copywriter. Like you have to do all this stuff and it's really, really challenging. So I have had to like definitely get new skills that I didn't have before. And sometimes I have good weeks with good content, and more often than not, I have bad weeks with content that just like I'm just bleeding followers. But it is what it is, and it's like kind of a nice distraction again with what we were talking about before. Where if I was like just obsessed with performance all day, every day, I think I'd like you know be the next woman in the yellow wallpaper. But I, yeah, it's definitely like it's cool, but it's also challenging because there's so many people that you're trying to compete with and it's always like well you need more followers, you need to do better and you need to take more photos and I'm just trying to keep
Yeah.
up but um it's kind of trivial but I do enjoy it so I'm just trying to like get better at it.
Yeah, I mean, it takes your normal community of the few people that you actually know and interact with, and they have like sort of full context as to who you are, and now you're expanded out times 50,000 to lots of people who have no idea of the context. I feel like for me, that's one of the reasons I really like podcasting because it's a medium where I can meet people fully and we can have a long enough conversation that there's so much context around it that it would be really hard to take anything out of context. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just to not deal with that side of things. Like it'd be
yeah.
very hard to misquote from a podcast because you're like, okay, but where was the rest of the hour and a half of that conversation?
Right,
Like
yeah,
you
absolutely.
missed it.
Well, and that's why I kind
Yeah.
of liked I have a YouTube channel and then And I had started and I was doing a lot with it and I was like trying to put I think we put like 4 videos out like every week for a month or something. And then I started like I thought that I was going to be feeling a lot better and then I ended up getting like more sick and having more issues. And I was just feeling really negative and I just didn't like need to be not that I'm like ever trying to be fake with anyone, but I didn't want to be putting like so much negative energy into people's life. Like everyone's already dealing with their own shit. Like they don't need to be dealing with mine too. So I was having a hard time and kind of like withdrew from the vlogging. But I liked it because I felt like people could actually understand me a little bit better. I mean, and they're like 6 to 10-minute episodes, so it's not nearly as thorough as a podcast. But I really liked it because I know that I'm a very strange person. And I know everyone says it about themselves, but like I've known myself for 24 years and I've known a lot of other people for a long time and I know that I'm very very strange. And I think that if like most people were ever given a chance to actually really know someone, most of us wouldn't have issues with people. Like I've been forced to interact with some people that I initially didn't like that once you start to understand that like someone has this that they're dealing with on their own or like that they have this sort of idiosyncrasy and whatever. I think that we have a much better understanding for people. So when you only get to know someone through like a well edited photo and like a well curated caption, like yeah, it is really easy to dislike someone or think that they're this or that. But like when you yeah, you listen to someone for an hour and a half or like you watch them on camera and you start to understand a little bit more, I think that we do get a better understanding of people because I've just had so much that I've said taken out of context. And it does hurt me because I really do care about other people's well being and I really, really try hard, like, not to speak from as much as I can, not to speak from a point of privilege or not to, like, lose sight of other people's situations. So, like, even with everything that's going on with um, the virus and the pandemic, I had said that I planned on staying home, even despite the fact that Arizona was lifting all sort of like shelter in place. And I got a bunch of flack for it, and people were really, really upset because they're like, "Well, that's your privilege, and like, must be nice. Like, we have to go back to work." And I was like, "That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go back to work, but I was saying that like because I can, I understand that I'm really fortunate to be able to not have to go back to work, but also that's impacting me too. And like I'm going to be one of the last people to be able to go back to work. Like they can make a case for going to a hair salon and going to a restaurant, but it's going to be a long time until they can justify the risk of a sporting event. So like just
Right.
because I can train doesn't mean I'm doing my job. Like no one's ever looked at
Yeah.
me and said, "You're so good at training. We'd like to pay you." Like I'm good at
Yeah.
racing. That's my job. And so it's like people
Right.
took this out of context and I felt like I was just screaming into the void being like, "No, no, 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 no." Like I mean, I still think that it's a bit of a mistake to try to open the economy again because it really is. We're just reopening the economy. It doesn't mean that like no one really cares. Like the people that are making these decisions aren't worried about a couple people getting sick and dying, but I really care about that. Like that's why I'm trying to be so serious. And so it really hurt my feelings. And I'm like, you know what? None of these people know you. Like if these people want to take what you're saying out of context, like that's how it's going to be. But like at the end of the day, I know that like what I was saying was not saying that like I'm privileged and I'm going to stay home. I'm saying like I wish that we were all able to stay home, and I don't think that like people rioting to be able to go to Mother's Day brunch is fair.
Well, I think it's so tricky. We take in so much information. We just take it all in so quickly every single
Yeah.
day. And we can only take in so much, so we have to cut out all of the context around any of that
Yeah.
information in order to be expedient with it. And then at the same time, we have to use our ability as humans to stereotype to decide how we feel about that information as quickly as possible so
Yeah.
that we can move on to the next information. And so when you're moving that fast, there's absolutely no way that someone's intention matters. So
Right.
the intention behind a statement, and it's just it gets really tricky, and it definitely bugs me how it feels like someone can't just say something that relates to just them. All you were
Yeah.
saying is you're choosing to stay home, and you were maybe sharing an opinion on what we ought to do as a country, which is your right, right? And then
Yeah.
outside of any other context, it's like, well, what about these people?
Yeah, I'm like
And
I'm like,
it's
I
like,
am
of
one of
course,
those people.
there's not enough characters on an Instagram post or a Twitter post to talk about all the different circumstances and all the people,
Yeah.
and make sure you're not excluding everyone, because as a human being who's using language that's imperfect, you also have to generalize in a short period of time. So
Yeah.
between the speaker and the listener, and I don't know, it just makes us all very divided. And I definitely feel like the only way through is really just good conversation and good context, and taking the
Yeah.
time and slow down on that information input and output, and just, you know, try to listen and try to have conversations. And oh man,
Yeah.
it's just so tricky. But I'm lucky enough that not enough people really follow me that it makes that big of a difference what I say. And I don't have people, I don't have keyboard warriors coming after
Yeah.
me like you do, probably, just when you say something about yourself.
Yeah. Well, and that's the
So
funny thing. I've like started looking, just like when I get these people that are so angry at me, like on the internet, I'll just click on their page and I'll see if they follow me. And none of them have, like, basically no person that's ever like been really, really mad has ever followed me. So I'm like, okay, so someone that you follow retweeted something that I wrote. And so you are making the assumption that, like, yes, there's so many like really privileged, like, like, I mean, not that I'm not privileged, but like to varying degrees, there's so many like privileged athletes that probably yeah, you're making the assumption that I'm like, well, I don't have to go back to work, so I think it's stupid and whatever. But I'm like, yeah, so anyway, not to go down not to go down that rabbit hole again of, like social justice warrior and the economy and stuff. But yeah, I think that it's easy to take stuff personally, and then you realize that like none of us really know each other, so we're all just making
right,
assumptions. And I'm like, all right, well, I can't get upset. They chose to interpret this in their own way. But yeah,
right.
I
Well,
always
and
feel bad.
it's we talk about how it's like the loudest person, the loudest, most extreme person in that school of thought
Yeah.
is going to be the one who's online leaving those messages.
Yeah.
Whatever, it doesn't matter what school of thought we're talking about. It could be political, it could be personal. It doesn't matter.
Right.
The loudest, most obnoxious person is the one advocating. But I think an issue for me is that it seems like now it's being characterized that if you don't have something to say about something, and if you don't side with someone on something, then you're 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 labeled as if you don't care. So now I feel like more and more people are saying more and more as loudly and extremely as they can,
Mhm.
because they have to look like they care about this issue, or they have something new to say.
Yes.
And that's that can't be right. That's that's
Right.
not how it's supposed to be. And I'm very much a big advocate of just like stay in my lane. So I really
Mhm.
try not to talk about things that I don't know about.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
absolutely. And I think like
but I also, that's a privilege for me too, because
yeah.
unlike you, I don't have enough people. Like, if you didn't say something, people would be like, well, why aren't you saying anything about the coronavirus? Like, why aren't
Yeah,
you getting
yeah, yeah,
involved
yeah.
with your influence? Oh
Yeah,
man.
I've had that before too. So it's a delicate balance.
Yeah,
But we're all
absolutely.
trying. We're all human. We're just trying to like
Yeah,
do our best.
yeah. Do our best with this technology that was never supposed to be a part of our
I
platform.
know.
Like,
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to our brains or bodies. What is this screen we look into and yell at? It
Yes.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And that's when you hop on the bike, or you grab a guitar and you get out into some nature,
Yeah.
and whatever it takes to get away from that weird machine we've created.
Yes. So
Uh,
central in our lives.
right. What is there anything else about you that you don't often get to talk about, but is something you are excited by? Like, I'm curious, you mentioned that you're a very strange person, but you've given me no evidence as to why you might actually be strange. Like, this has all made sense so far. What am
Really?
I missing to round you out as a person?
Well, I feel like, okay, I feel like I'm a professional athlete and I was like asked on a podcast, like, because I'm a professional athlete, like you never would have found my page if I was just like a random person. But then I spent the
Uh, I
whole
care to disagree, because I specifically look for the weirdest persons. You're on the podcast because you live in Tucson.
okay, okay, that's fine. That's fair. But I still, I mean, I feel like I don't know, I spent the whole time talking about like mysterious illness and like prison reform, which is like a
Yeah.
little bit like off center from like most athletes. But I think my brain works in a very weird way, and I have, like, my own jokes with myself that I think are, like, the funniest thing in the world that, like, even my boyfriend, who's, like, eerily similar to me, will be like, "What?" Like, the other day, I was making a mashup of a Queen song with a Miley Cyrus song because I, like, noticed a similarity in the lyrics, and and I'm the only person that will ever think that that's clever.
It's a good project. I like it. I
Yeah.
like it.
Um, so, I mean, I don't really know how to describe why I'm a weird person, but I am. Like, I've always had, like, my own language with people that I'm close with, and, um, yeah, I know every word to every song I've ever listened to kind of thing, but, um, yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of other weird people in the world, but I think we're very used to, like, professional athletes being, like, professional athletes and that's it, and even to the point that when athletes try to, like, leave that lane, it's like, "Stick to sports." Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that I've never been in that lane, so no one's ever really tried to tell me to stick to sports because I, like, never have. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer the question.
Well, I think what you're touching on is something that I actually really love about this podcast and was a huge intention for this show because I, with the advent of social media, everybody has to become a brand, and a brand
Yeah.
doesn't make sense unless it is one thing.
Yeah.
And we forget that there's a lot of things that make up a person, and I think that what starts to happen when we assume that everybody needs to be one thing or be only into this group of things that are related or whatever it might be, is that you lose the ability. Like, you got one life. Get into as much stuff as you think is
Mhm.
cool and you're into and you like to do. And if you're encouraged to just be one thing, you're going to have a really boring life, and my guess is at the end of it you're going to be like, what was I doing? I just did that one thing. Really? Like, life is large.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just did one thing.
Exactly.
um so we're almost encouraged in that way, and then even that's it's you describe it as strange that you've got sort of a wide variety of interests and that you might get on a podcast and not just talk about bikes the whole time, because that's outside of that brand, but you know, we're all more than that, and we get to be into a lot of things. You're the, there's a positive side of that. There's a positive way of looking at that in ourselves too. Like, I love I don't know why, but I love the expression like being a Renaissance man. That excites me.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think I probably heard that from Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
I feel like Aziz Ansari described Jay-Z as a Renaissance man,
Okay.
which is that I feel like that's where that came from for
Okay.
me,
Yeah.
at least the first time I heard it. But now I feel like everybody is a Renaissance man or woman. They are whatever they want to be and into whatever they want to be
Yeah.
into, and I think that that's really cool, and we should probably encourage it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would be better off if they kind of pursued the things that interested them, and I've actually struggled because, like, I'm interested in so much, but I've never become, like, hyper interested in any one thing. Um, and it's probably because I have, like, undiagnosed ADHD and, like, all
Don't we
sorts of
all?
other I know, especially now, everyone's, like, really struggling with focus, but, I, like, have been really interested in building, like, miniature models, but then, like, in the same day, I'm like, "Well, maybe I'll pick up the guitar," and also, like, I'm finally gonna get back into, like, my video editing and all of this, and so I think that it's good that especially now, I think a lot of people are pursuing, like, the things that they enjoy, like, because there is a lot of downtime, and we've had these, like, 8 weeks of just kinda sitting at home, so I think people have been able to lean into stuff that makes them happy a little bit more, and I think that's a positive to come out of this. If there's
Yeah.
any silver lining, it's that, like, I think people can, yeah, focus on their happy place a little bit more.
I love looking at the silver lining of this whole thing. I've been trying to do it on every episode. There is
Yeah.
a massive non-silver lining. Obviously, lining implies that there's like a whole lot of crap, and then there's just a little bright spark around the edge.
Mhm. Yeah.
So everybody, don't take this out of context. But on
Yeah.
every episode, I've been trying to find what that is, and I've talked to people about like how the educational system is going to change, how business is going to change, how
Mhm.
commerce is going to change in massive ways at the end of this. And I'm really hopeful that people, just like you said, spending that time doing things that they like doing because they have a weird opportunity to do it for a minute,
Yeah.
and companies seeing that employees can work from home and do as well productively. Like, did you just hear about Twitter doing this whole thing
No?
where now Jack Dorsey of Twitter is saying you can all just work from home after this, no
Wow.
one has to ever come and work in person again?
Yeah,
um
that's
I-
It's
I'm
really
sure that's
good.
an overcharacterization of what it actually. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
that's hyperbole in a lot of ways, but
yeah,
it's good. I have a whole team at my company of all only ever remote workers.
yeah,
It's that's been big for me, and that's huge for Andrew and I to be able to travel and do this full time.
yeah.
And I'm a big believer in it. So I really do hope that good things come out of this.
Yeah, I
So
hope so. And I hope from like the remote standpoint, one, like for health purposes, I think it's really good. Mental health, it's huge. And then to cut, I just hope that companies see how much more people can do with like, I mean, what's the average commute time? I think that the average commute is 40 minutes each
it's
way,
something like
is
that.
something like that. And I'm not a source either,
And
so fact check me, but average doesn't
the
mean
average doesn't even cover it because you've got like LA where it's probably like 2.5 hours.
And it's like, do people really need to like think about what people could do with that time and also like what the environment could do with that like freed up
Yeah,
space and so I think that yeah, if something comes out of this, I just hope that brands or not just brands, sorry, companies can understand that like people keep talking like we're never really going to go back to normal. Like there's going to be like kind of a post coronavirus world. And I hope
right.
that the post coronavirus world involves a lot more consideration about like, you know, modern society. Like, yeah, people had to go into the office even 6 years ago because we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have like the same sort of like hangouts and instant messenger and stuff like that to be able to communicate like 99.9% of what people do when they go and just sit at a desk job or like at a cubicle could be done at home with way happier work environments. And obviously, there are people that have to go into work, but even just thinking about if only people that had to go into a physical office space were commuting, it would cut down commute times. People would still be happier just having like a less stressful commute. So I really hope that there is some critical thought put into returning to work for people that have been forced to work from home.
It's going to be a new world on the other side of this,
Yeah, well,
for better or worse.
yeah, for better or for worse.
I'll focus on the better. I'll always focus on the better.
Yeah,
That's otherwise I'll go crazy. I can't focus on the worse all
yeah, yeah. It can be really heavy.
day. um I am so excited for my return to Tucson
Yeah,
whenever I'm back, which I bet you will come back in the winter again because it was the most pleasant winter I've ever
it's
experienced ever.
incredible.
So
Yeah,
I'm certain I'll be back then. When I'm back, will you take me mountain biking?
yeah, gladly. Oh my gosh, I would love it.
Yeah,
So,
that
please,
would be awesome.
please.
I have a busy social schedule when I come back to Tucson because I've done all of these episodes remotely out of Tucson. I did so many. So I think that while I'm there again, I'm going to do jujitsu. I believe I'm going to go hiking. I think I'm going to do some outdoor yoga. I don't want to leave
Wow,
anybody off this list. Wait a minute. Because I did a lot of different episodes
wow.
while I was in Tucson.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. Is that everybody? Don't let me leave anybody off. Oh, I get to go triathlon training.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so yeah, Tucson's gonna be busy for me, but I would love if we could get together and do some mountain biking or biking of any sort because I don't get on a bicycle that often.
Yeah,
I don't have one with me, so I don't really have the opportunity.
yeah. Probably not a lot of room in the RV for a bike to collect dust.
I've got it would be if I didn't already have the motorcycle in the back of the truck,
Yeah.
and that's I can't give that up. Like that was
No.
coming with us. It's a pain to like load it and unload it everywhere we go, but we do it because it's worth it.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll have to let me bike and maybe take it easy on me
Yeah,
as a
I
beginner.
promise.
I bet you I could do downhill pretty. I have pretty good balance, so I
Mhm.
feel like I'd be all right. But if you're asking me to work my quads up that hill, it's gonna be you're gonna be waiting on me for a while.
That's fine. We'll see how you end up.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you share with everybody where they can find you so they can go get you on social media and all that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok now at Ellen Likes Bikes, and I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/Ellen Noble Cyclist. So that's
Perfect. Anything else
literally
we can promote for you to the listeners, or anything else you're trying to get attention for at the moment? I noticed you have a camp that you do
yeah,
that probably you're waiting to figure out when you're gonna be able to do that
yeah.
again. But do you want to tell people about that just a little bit too?
Yeah, the summary for that is I run a well, it's actually very specifically not a camp, for legal reasons. It's a
Oh, I see. Okay,
quest. No, you can say it. So
a
it's
quest.
kind of heavy-handed at this point, but it's called a quest. And it's a like kind of training program, summer program style, um, not a camp that I've run for. This was supposed to be the fourth year, and I'm devastated, honestly, to miss it
Yeah.
because it's the highlight of my year every year. It's so amazing, and it's for like junior women. So like cycling has a category called junior, which is under 18. So it's usually women like 15 to 18, young women athletes in cycling. And so for the first 2 years, we did a skills camp or a skills program where the girls learned about the technique that comes with cyclocross, which is really, really vital in the sport. And then last year we came to Tucson. Before I was living here, we came to Tucson and we did like a training program. So we did like a lot of long endurance miles with like huge focus on obviously base training, like endurance training, but we did a big focus on nutrition, body work, meditation, mindfulness, all of that. So it's like really, really comprehensive. And a big factor is I'm really trying to like not promote wealth inequality in cycling because it's so easy for only the people the who can afford the opportunities to get the opportunities. So we do a lot of fundraising throughout the year to be able to like kind of hand out scholarships to each athlete that needs it. So especially last year we gave out like I don't even remember how much, but we were completely need blind. So we accepted the athletes based on their application, and then we had a separate column that had asked like what they needed to be able to make the camp happen, to make the quest happen. And so we gave out travel stipends to some of the girls, which would allow for getting a flight to Tucson, having their bike mailed there. We gave out obviously full entry to the program quite a lot. So it's definitely it's a business, but it's an experience first and a business second. So we try really hard to keep the costs low where we can while still having it be a really like good all around experience for everyone. And to not be able to do it this year was pretty devastating. But with the way that things are going, I just didn't feel comfortable trying to reschedule it for the fall because one, everyone's back in school, and two, we just don't really know what's going to happen. It's optimistic to say that we'll be back in the fall, but we don't really know how the virus is going to progress. So I would rather focus on having a really, really strong 2021 with just a little bit of a break. And I hope that everyone can understand. But yeah, it's a pretty incredible program. There's a lot of heart and soul that goes into it.
I love it. That sounds great. So everybody make sure that you check that out and see what Ellen is up to at Ellen Likes Bikes everywhere. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah,
I
thanks so
had a really
much.
good time. I'm glad we went down those weird rabbit holes,
Yeah,
and
it was really fun.
I wish we had more time. We'll have to do another one when I come out and when I get to actually mountain bike with you, and we get
Yeah,
to we'll talk about how poorly I did, and it'll be a good episode that
I
time
would
too.
never.
Well, I definitely will. I'll call myself out even if you want. You're
Okay.
too classy to call me out, but I'll take care of it.
Classy.
So I'll have to gosh, I'm gonna have to get really creative with the photo I do for this one because you got such cool photos. I'll figure something out,
Okay.
people. If you want to see the photo that I'll collage together, then as always, you can find me on Instagram at thicksonlife. And on Twitter, if you want to engage with me and talk to me about who I should have on the show, it's also at thicksonlife. And what else am I missing? Oh, big one. Thank you to our podcast sponsor, Track Farms, CBD. We've got some awesome products that have just gone out, like their tinctures they just sent me, which are amazing. I'm sure you all listened through the ad at the beginning. But if you want to go to the link in my bio at thicksonlife or go to track-farms.com/strangers and use the code strangers at checkout, you get 15% off, and it is worth it. That stuff is good. So thank you everyone for listening. Thanks once again to Ellen, and as always, we will see you on the next episode.